So probably hit go or something. Oh, you did hit go when I wasn't looking. Amazing.
Just did, just now.
Anyhow, welcome everyone. Osquery office hours. So we usually like to start with either announcements or questions. I guess big announcement is that we cut 440 about a week ago now. And I haven't heard about any problems, and I think we're planning on pushing that live. So that's always exciting. Next up is sort of, I don't know, anyone else have any announcements they'd like? Okay, first more meaty item is whether anyone's got questions, issues, or PRs people have brought to talk about. Any questions from the community? I have a quick question that I ran into. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was just going to bring that up, but I think it's your question.
Yeah. So I spent a little bit of time last night tracking down random bugs in Osquery, and one of the things that seems to persistently be an issue, or sometimes be an issue, is that some underlying source of data returns a uint64, but SQLite is fundamentally assigned in 64. And I don't know what we want to do about that. Right now, the behavior we get is that if we actually get something that is too big to fit in in 64, we basically just throw an error, and you get you don't get data for that column. I sort of think that we should stop throwing an error, because this, I don't know, it seems like it happens a lot. So I kind of was curious what people thought. Like, it feels like something that should maybe be a debug log, not a warning log. I don't know. Curious what people think about that.
I guess you have to ask individuals for their opinion.
Do we have an issue for this?
I don't know if we have a specific issue, but it comes up a lot when people have like when they're like looking at their Osquery logs and they see random warnings about like data cannot be cast. At least some of the time it's in 64 versus uint64 issue. I put up a pull request for the one I hunted down last night, but I was trying to decide if I should move it out of the virtual table and into actual virtual.cpp. This is PR 6546. It's the one that sent me down this rabbit hole.
So most of the time it can cast, and the times where it can't, it warns?
Yeah, it throws like a warning error, and you get nothing. So I'm sort of tempted to basically just recognize that happens and stick if it's too big, then don't warn us about it. Like,
I think I'm in the camp of data integrity is one of the most important things. So if we run into issues where we try to cast and we cannot, that's essentially a data integrity problem. So the output is not what the person would expect. So we should be loud about it, and we should not hide that problem.
So that's a vote for keeping it out of virtual CPP and handling it in the table implementations with effectively the knowledge about what the API is returning is.
And thus, if that isn't handled in the virtual table and it gets to the SQLite error, then it indicates an error, or at least a warning, and we should continue to warn or throw an error as such.
That seems like a fine stance. And yeah, we can. Okay, cool.
This actually helped me caught an error in the UPF socket events table the other day.
I bet it's the same one I was fixing on OS X, because they're both from the same BSD sources.
Probably.
Yeah, the socket IDs occasionally show up as being in the high bits, and I don't know what it means. So like if you just said select star from open sockets on OS X, you'll get an error back. You'll also get data, but a bunch of the sockets are coming back with their IDs as something super high. So I don't know. Okay, I'll do something on this table and we can figure that out. Thank you. next thing here is from Trail of Bits, something about a generic scan engine callback.
Yeah, so we were being asked to modify the Yara table such that they can take the client can take more control of how they disseminate the signatures, because they treat the Yara signatures as sensitive, I guess, for either read or write, and they don't want management of an additional file. So they wanted they want us to propose a way to deliver it at a band without the file on disk. And that discussion went down a few different paths, but then they came back and said, what if instead of making this specific to the Yara table, we made Osquery more useful for scanning purposes by allowing you to plug in a scan to things like the file enumeration table. So if the query, were to return all the files in a particular directory, this hypothetical configuration would allow you to also have those results scanned by any scanner that understood the callback and provide some sort of scan result column, so that the query they got back would be, for instance, all of the files in the user's directory have been scanned clean according to our scanner, which is whatever they want it to be, either virus scan or Yara scan or what have you. But it's sort of taking the responsibility out of Osquery to implement a thing like Yara. And then they can protect their signatures and whatever sort of encrypted or obfuscated or other different mechanism they want. They can protect their detection secret sauce, that sort of thing.
Can a join be used for this instead and provide the signatures through something like whatever they use to deploy, like Chef or Puppet? Do they mean to send the signature somehow to Osquery via network?
Well, let's start with the Yara as an example. They didn't want to be configured. They didn't want to have to place that file where it usually is found. And I think it's less about the hassle of managing that file and more about, in the current implementation, that file is, I guess, those Yara signatures exist in a way that a hypothetical adversary could read them off, right? And maybe that's the concern. So it's kind of like a disclosure or readability issue. I don't know. Anyway, their requirement was not placing a file on the disk, and any solution to that is on the table. But at the current time, I wanted to propose this idea of like a scan engine extensibility solution. And yeah.
I don't understand your example well enough. So with the Yara one, right, I can use Osquery to enumerate some files. Cool. And if everything was in Osquery, I know how to do that join and get back the data I expect. That's cool. But I don't understand what you're proposing. Like, would this basically be an exec callout? Would they end up having to write a C extension?
Well, the mechanism is still TBD. It's the concept, I guess, that I wanted to get some feedback on. Well, so if the answer is a tentative yes, dependent on the mechanism, then we can hash that out in a blueprint issue. But I wanted to see if this is something that people generally consider as safe or valuable to do this.
I don't understand how it's different than just doing a join. Like if you implemented your scanner as a table and then joined against it, like I guess I'm missing something. I don't understand what the difference is.
And maybe that is the mechanism. Maybe it's a join with a table. I mean, that's why I brought this up.
Isn't that effectively a scan engine callback?
Is it? Alessandro believes it is. You're suggesting it is?
I mean, you're saying someone writes a thing that takes a list of files and returns some set of information about them. Fundamentally, that's a virtual table with a required path parameter and a join.
And that can be done in an extension if they want to protect secret sauce, right?
I mean, we do this at Collide all the time. Not so much to protect it, but Launcher ships a bunch of tables, and we do things like select from file matching path, feed into Collide, encrypted key fingerprinting is a common one for us. So stuff like that. If you wanted to talk about Yara specifically, I think the idea of being able to send down Yara signatures as part of the query is pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's
well, as part of the query, you can get some signatures in there. I don't know if all signatures are possible to deliver that way in the syntax or if there's limitations, but we would like to probably do that as a first pass, and then as a second later PR, implement what they're asking, which is to give them other options rather than drop the Yara signatures on the drive. And okay, maybe what I'm hearing is a table join implemented in an extension would be effectively an IPC, and we could just go with that.
Maybe there's another way. I mean, it would be really hard to implement some kind of callback and plugin system right inside the file table. One thing that could be possible, and this depends on whether everyone agrees whether it is a good idea or not, but the Yara table could implement an additional hidden column where you can specify the URL where the signatures can be taken from, and they are used in a way that they are not dropped on disk. So you could easily keep everything in core with just this minor addition to the Yara table.
Could, but then the Yara table is contacting a third-party network host, right?
Only if you use it.
Yeah. And we can maybe implement some kind of flag to either disable or enable this behavior.
So it would be allowable to retrieve signatures as long as that behavior is disabled by default?
I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, that it is fine to connect to external hosts as long as this is clear to the user that it is going to happen. I mean, if you were to use the CURL table, you're going to query a remote host. It would be different if the connection was due to a side effect caused by you querying a table.
I mean, if the Yara table accepts a parameter of what the actual signature file's content is, you can just you can join it to curl if you want to get fancy.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to consider with this would be currently in the config file, there's no way to get remote resources, right? Inside the config file, it'd be nice to specify certain other files that are on the server, maybe in subdirectories that you can then use for things like this. And you'll have the option of, storing it locally on disk or just keeping it in memory. And then you can refer to it in your Yara.
I think part of the reason that isn't done is so that Osquery isn't making changes to the file system if it's being used for investigations.
Could be cached in RAM, though.
Yeah, if it's retrieving signatures and the whole goal is to avoid being on disk, then caching it would be the behavior I was looking for in RAM. Okay, I didn't know that we would allow a network connection as long as it was well documented and off by default. And if that's true, then that opens another alternative.
I mean, we do this for a variety of tables, right? Like anything that's hitting cloud metadata is basically a curl call under the hood. Docker may involve network calls. I don't know that I want like a runtime flag, but if the column heading was where URL equals X, then like I think the expectation is clear. And I'm curious how other people weigh in, but like I'm not particularly bothered by the core idea of a table that is trying to, like a Yara table, where you're trying to like compare a thing against a signature and saying signature comes from this URL. Like that doesn't feel wrong to me. It feels okay.
Yeah, I agree.
What was Alex's question or comment about would be nice to include additional configurability?
Hold on to my shoulder.
Yeah. Rather than putting a URL in a table column, which seems weird to me, I would rather have the configuration file specify the resources that are remote, since they're essentially configured. And then inside your Yara rules, that's where you put the references to those. Right? They have a resource ID or a name.
That seems like it gets a little weird, because you could imagine that I could easily imagine a company where they're maybe doing mostly threat hunting or exploratory work, and they're doing a lot of digging on an ad hoc nature, and their Yara signature file is changing frequently, but their Osquery config is basically just go talk to our server. Like what? So it feels like these change on different frequencies.
Yeah, I was just thinking more in terms of a schedule, not something that's ad hoc like that.
It will probably have to be happening in one.
Feels like it. If you wanted to think about it ad hoc, it may feel a little bit like discovery queries, where you could talk about caching it on its own cache cycle. Like if you did if you joined against it, you wouldn't want every hit to basically pull down that URL. You'd want some kind of short-term caching.
Can I time check us? This seems like a good discussion. We should escalate to Blueprint.
Okay, we'll do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Daddy. So the first formal agenda item is the 4.4.0 release, and I think we thought we should push it live. Cool. I'm not going to do it during this, and I think, Teddy, some of that's on you, but we can do it after the meeting or so.
Done.
From Teddy, container table API. You wanted to talk about maybe hitting up the SQLite people.
Mama, can you come? I need to show you.
Yeah, I think two things here. One, I don't need a lot of discussion around it. I just wanted to bring attention back to the discussion, the multiple points that we had. I can hear someone in the background. If you're not speaking, do you mind muting? I just want to bring discussion back to that issue. So if everyone has some time later, can you go and review like the approaches for the container API and just kind of weigh in with some thoughts? And the second thing I wanted to bring up is that in the past, we have gone to the SQLite consortium and like asked them for features. It's not free. Like we kind of have to pay for it in a roundabout way where we like donate to the consortium and then we get, I'm not sure exactly what the API is, but it's possible that we could ask for more features from SQLite specifically for Osquery. I included two in this document, which is one, you can use a table as a function, but there's no way to put keyword arguments into it. And the second was the approach that we went with for the container API, which was to mark some columns that you use in the predicate as hidden to not impact the people who are using these tables not in a container sense. The downside here was if you do want those two columns, which is PID to namespace and the mount namespace, I think, if you do want them to be returned in the query result, you have to explicitly select them instead of just star select them. we could ask for a feature where if we specify columns in the predicate, they sort of automatically show up in the select, or they show up in the star select. Just some ideas. Just wanted to throw this out there for discussion. I think the best place to discuss this is in that issue that I referenced.
And I'm sorry, what was that issue number?
6428.
Thank you.
Do you have a sense of what it costs?
I don't have an accurate sense of what it costs. No. Probably 10,000 in ballpark. But I've never used that relationship as a contracting relationship. I use that relationship as we want to be part of the consortium, and there's a cost to be part of the consortium. There's levels to that. And with being part of the consortium, you get certain benefits, like the bugs that you submit are triaged quickly, and you can do things like ask for feature requests. So this is asking for features and having those features implemented was an artifact of being in the consortium. So that's why I say my sense is not accurate.
I'm mostly like, we don't have a whole lot of money, so I feel like joining industry consortiums is kind of awesome, but also feels a little out of reach. I might be wrong, but
As far as hiding the PID to namespace columns, isn't that something we could do after we get the results? Doesn't necessarily need to be implemented in SQLite 3, I think.
Right now, what we do is we mark those columns as hidden. And if you want them to show up in the query, then you just explicitly select them.
I think what Alex is saying is that we can remove, well, we can not make them hidden. We remove the hidden attribute, and then somehow we mark them as special columns, and we hide them simply from the std out or the logger output, etc. So we do not use SQLite to hide them, but we hide them later when we receive the data, the rows. Yeah.
I see.
I could even imagine saying that since if we standardize the names, we could basically just at the output level say, if column is named X and it is empty, then don't omit the column. Feels kind of dirty, but
Yeah, cool. That's kind of what I wanted to bring up. If you have thoughts, please weigh in on the issue.
did you also mentioned you wanted to talk about a 450 versus 500 labeling?
I think, yeah, sorry, I need to refresh. I've been doing too many things right now. I guess what I wanted to mention is like we want to continue to fix bugs and merge pull requests. And so we should shoot for a 4.5 release. But at the same time, there's like these big milestones that we have to hit. Like we are still on the path of rebranding some of Osquery to Osquery Foundation instead of Osquery, the product that Facebook built. And so a couple of those steps are like changing the, I think, product ID that's used, which still says Facebook in it, as well as changing over who signs the binary for macOS, and so on and so forth, as well as getting a release pipeline, like an automatic release pipeline. So we should still track the progress through those big milestones. I want to be clear that when we hit those milestones, we're calling that a 5.0 release. But until we've hit all of those, we want to continue to like release it, have Osquery releases, right?
That's how I've been operating.
Cool. I guess just a point of clarification.
The next item you wanted to raise was AWS accounts. I think maybe the top line item is someone to help with this would be pretty cool. So if anyone likes AWS and infrastructure as code, I would love help. So here's what I have done. I did this weekend. Thank you for the prompting, Teddy. I went and started creating an org structure for Osquery. So we now have a set of linked AWS accounts. They're all tied to my credit card. I suspect we are fine within the free tier for a while. And I kind of started getting bogged down trying to set up things like Terraform or CloudFormation. I personally believe pretty strongly in infrastructure as code. And I think it's important for us to kind of extend that in our context, since fundamentally we're releasing security software. And I don't use AWS much anymore, so I'm not as familiar with a lot of the infrastructure as code tooling there. So if someone's excited to dig their hands in, I'd love help. The other thing I wanted to figure out is what our sort of specific needs for that are, because I've kind of lost track. I think maybe we need a bucket which we serve which we're serving the package repositories out of, and I don't remember if there's anything else.
Yeah, S3, which is probably the biggest need. So I'm not even sure how much bandwidth that uses right now for the bucket. And we need CloudFront for the domains, and we need Route 53 for the DNS. That's it.
On my personal account, I was able to get some free credits for the AR64 machine to do the first part for the Linux support for that architecture.
I thought the domain stuff was transferred to the Linux Foundation.
Yeah, they own the domain, but then we also need to host it. So
Okay.
yes, they own it, but the resolvers point to Route 53, and that's where we configure it. That's where the zone is hosted, is in Route 53.
Okay. Yeah, we may want to think about what things we want to keep in AWS versus what things want to land in G Suite. Because I don't. Some of this is my own bias. I'm certainly biased a bit more towards G Suite, generally speaking. But there might be an argument for doing some things in AWS.
Great point. Yeah, the argument is essentially CloudFront, since we do some TLS termination and also manage the private keys for the certificates in AWS. You get this, like, everything kind of works because you're hosting your zone, you're managing your certificates, you're doing your TLS termination, plus your denial of service protection. So yeah,
I see.
Yeah,
that sounds
So-
much more nicely integrated than Google's.
Well, and it looks from the chat like we have a few folks who are willing to help out with this stuff. So maybe if we can document what needs to be done, then we can.
I'll try and
harness
set
some of that
thing up. I have to write down these names. Also, feel free to Slack me. I'm just Seth, and then I'll have those.
I also wanted to bring up one other thing. I don't know if you guys know, but you guys can apply for an AWS grant, and you guys can actually get AWS credit. And I've done this before. It's a pretty simple process. Pretty straightforward, so hopefully that will alleviate anyone having to pay anything out of pocket.
So there's a couple of things that I've seen. So one of them is a lot of the existing AWS grant programs seem to sort of require that you already have a sense of what your spend will be. So it's a little bit more like, oh, you've been using this a while, now we can give you grants. So that's a thing that I don't know yet. Another one is that at least some of the AWS grant stuff is oriented towards 501c3s, whereas we're a 501c6. but their free tier is also pretty generous. So I kind of don't even want to think about it until we figure out, is this going to cost more than like $2 a month?
Sure. Yeah, I've just done it before, and I've asked like for $5 and $10 grand. I've seen people ask for like $80,000 for 1 year,
Nice.
and I've never seen people be denied. So, just kind of putting that as an option. They're usually pretty generous. I've never seen them really deny anyone. So,
Point of clarification, their website for the AWS Imagine grants just says 501c corporations, doesn't specify 3 or 6 or.
They have a different nonprofit pattern as well. Their nonprofit page is explicitly 501c3. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think the reality is that the amount of services we're going to be using here is probably on the order of a couple bucks a month. And we do have a little bit of a budget from a handful of donations to Osquery via the Linux Foundation. Nevertheless, I mean, I think it's probably worth putting in a request for a small amount of credit, and I'm happy to help with doing that. We can just see if we can get that plugged into the account.
Okay. Sorry, just taking notes. Teddy had a couple of sort of big questions about the community, like how do we grow the community, and how do we make progress on closing bugs? And I don't know. I don't know if we want to just wait for Teddy on those 2 items. So I don't know if anyone wants to talk about them, or we just kick them into next meeting.
Yeah, and I mean, and I just throw out to anyone, in the crowd here now, if you'd like to get more involved with reviewing PRs or fixing bugs, just feel free to reach out to Ted or I, and we'll try to organize. We can either organize a group thing for getting up to speed on that stuff, or work with you individually to do that, and that would be awesome.
We could do bounties if we ever have a budget for bugs like that.
I mean, a thing that I know Zach's floated before is like, if we have budgets, then we can talk about, hiring people to code. So it's a little bit more direct than a bounty.
Yeah. If the bounty were priced fairly, and so we get quality work, and still a model that would maybe be, it would show our hypothetical sponsor where their dollars are going, rather than if we employ somebody, their time might be more ambiguous. Like the time that maybe that TrailerBits has put in via Stefano, for instance, it's great, but it's even hard to quantify that sometimes. Like, yeah, he's worked on the build chain, but if there were bugs and they were bountied, then you've got really discrete value for your money, if that's something that we want to consider.
Need to find out how to get more donations.
No, I mean, I sort of started looking at some bugs, and a lot of them just feel like time. Like a lot of them aren't, some of them are hard, thorny bugs, but a lot of them are just like, here's a thing that's been, vaguely broken for 2 years, and no one's quite had the time to trip over it and fix it.
Well, so if they're straightforward bugs, that's great, because then we have a good idea of what they ought to cost in terms of time. So we can price them. And if we can price them, then maybe we can go to a sponsor and be like, look, all these things we could afford to fix for $5,000. And then that's kind of like a proposal, If you want to sponsor, you can get these things done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's an interesting thought. I don't know. I don't even know how to start with it in some ways. Couple of other items here. So I started playing with GitHub Actions, partly as a means to looking at doing release automation. It's probably most interesting to the various people who've worked on the build system. And it went pretty straightforwardly. Still kind of tinkering out the last bits.
They're not terrible.
They seem to work. They're very clearly like a second version of the Azure pipelines work. So all of this stuff Stefano did in the Azure pipelines, I sort of just cut and pasted and made a GitHub action workflow. I hope they get some more of that done. I know Stefano saw it because he commented on my little PR off in directionless land. So that's pretty cool. Someone also added a thing here about 1Password trial expiration. I will look into this.
Yeah, I added that. I just received an email about that today. So I wonder if we want to start paying or find another solution.
We do not have a trial. We are on their nonprofit program, which may require poking someone every year. So I will take on poking them.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you.
I think I got that email
but
last
I
night.
was going to say, as far as GitHub Actions, I mean, I've worked with it some. I think it's great to keep everything sort of consolidated and integrated there. And I believe since we're an open source repository, it's pretty much free for us. Something like that, or at least quite a bit is free. And I think that both moving CI, build process, all of that, as well as the website deployment, are all worthy goals. And now that we've been migrated to the new plane where we have access to it. Or have we been migrated?
Not that
so
I
maybe
know
we
of.
maybe
we do
need
have
to
access, I think.
Okay.
I'll double check if we have a clicky button. We have a clicky button, so it should work. Okay, I will look into 1Password. I think those are all the things people brought up ahead of time. Anyone want to chat about anything else in this list? Anyone have any other things? So if no one has any other items, one of the things that we talked about doing was trying to, if we had extra time and people wanted to hang out, looking at old PRs. If anyone has any PRs they'd like to, we could just pull some up and take a look.
I think I'm free for the next 18 minutes.
Yeah, well, you want to pick a random PR? I have to take out any of the links y'all gave me in this chat here and put them into my minutes doc. Otherwise, they will go away when the meeting ends.
I'm looking.
Now, if I look at the recent ones, let's see. I said I opened up a small pile of relatively boring bugs. Looks like there's some pretty simple ones. There's a Windows 32-bit support PR from Breakwell. That's kind of exciting.
When did that come through?
When? Yesterday.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like a major one.
Surprisingly not, actually. Do we want to end this? You could probably stop recording. Like, I think meeting, or we could keep recording. I don't know. How do you all want to do it? Ooh, I've got a thing.
I'll stop recording. Is that okay?
I think it's fine.
All right. Bye, everybody.